Alright, my friends, I apologize for the last videos because I forgot to turn fucking mono off. So I set some higher gain, but I still have a noise filter. So God willing, there won't be any problems with noise in this video, but we'll find out. So I am also talking directly into the fucking microphone now so that people can hear me. Cause I got one of those fucking what's it called? Condenser, is it a condenser dynamic, whatever the fuck. Anyways, you have to like really fucking talk into it or else people can't hear you. So now I can mumble and people can actually hear what I'm saying. So that's really cool. But anyways, today we're going to talk about stability because I've made a video way back that people saw called "Don't Use Arch," and I want to say again, don't use Arch. But I'm going to try to attack a different thing right now because this applies to more than just Arch. Where if you're running something like Debian, SID, Arch, Garuda, Endeavor, anything based on Arch, really Ardix, got similar problems. Just sans the systemd issues. Or if you're running what else, like Gentoo testing, or if you're running what else would you Void Linux. That was one that I also had stability issues with, but I'm pretty sure it was just because I was fucking around and I found out. So, anyways, there's this whenever I see an Arch user, I'm always kind of counting down the days until they become not an Arch user when they switch to something sane. And I've got this joke that it's like there is a Arch to Debian pipeline where you get so sick of shit breaking that you end up on a different, like a more stable distribution entirely. And with both Arch and Debian SID, I have actually seen drives get bricked. As in, like, people have lost all their fucking data because they didn't have backups. They had an external drive and it just crapped out on them because some shit broke in their in the operating system. And I want to bring up again that I actually did have an issue with the bad grub update on Garuda. And if my motherboard didn't have a backup BIOS, it would have actually bricked my motherboard and I would have had to buy a new one. That would be a really fucking expensive expensive problem to fix. And while that wasn't Arch's fault, technically that was more Leonard Pottering's fault because he thought mounting EFI variables as read write was a good idea. It wasn't. And yeah, that's one reason that I'm really not into systemd because it's got shit like this that are just bad ideas. And they end up breaking people's computers. So good thing he works at Microsoft now. But yeah, so whenever I bring this up though and I say people always ask, should I use Arch? Should I use Debian SID? And I say no, because you're playing with fucking fire. Your shit can break. Like it can actually break your hardware. That's how bad this is. You are playing with fire and eventually you are going to get burned. So what happens when I see an Arch user is I start again counting how many days it is before they switch back to something else. And I have known many Arch users, and I have passing familiarity with many more. But it gets to the point though where they get tired of shit breaking, and there's not always an easy fix for it, despite what people will say. But you always hear some arguments, right? And the first one is, well, I've never had any stability issues, and I've been running it for 6 months or whatever. I'm like, cool. Now, what'll happen in 7 months? you know like what happens to your distribution in 7 months when you get that bad update and then shit breaks? And then what they say is afterward they say, oh well, Arch actually taught me how to fix things because it breaks so often, so I'm able to learn how to fix the problems I'm having on my distribution. So I'm like, cool, but what happens when there's something you can't fix? And then we get to the point where they say, okay, I switched over to Debian and life's a lot better. So people, especially Arch users, because they'll watch Mental Outlaw and they'll think that Gentoo is like the hardest thing imaginable. And when I first tried it, I thought it was too. I thought this is gonna be a super hard distribution. I can't figure out what the fuck it's telling me. I can't. What the fuck is a use flag? What does that do? I don't know anything about compiling software. I've barely compiled any programs. I don't know what's going on. But the more I got into it, and you can use their Discord for help, and people will generally try to help you. And for a new user, your issues are going to be pretty easy to fix because there are a lot of things Gentoo does that are difficult to learn at first, and some packages pull in different stuff. So like Mate will pull in an entire sound server, which takes out an entire step of post install. But if you were to use KDE or something, you would have to pull in your own audio server, and that's another thing you got to learn. So I try to have a very simple installation that has just the basics, and then I put my stuff on top of it. But I like having functionality out of the box. But what really got me compared to Arch, where Arch is a very quick install, Gentoo takes me about 20-30 minutes now. And that's if I know exactly what I'm doing and I just throw commands in. But I found that Arch was really difficult to maintain because of how many times it broke, and I didn't want to set up fucking backups. Like, I don't want to have to time shift my way out of problems. That just give me a fucking stable operating system. And Gentoo had the newer packages while remaining relatively stable because its maintainers are a lot better. And this brings me back to another video I made where the backbone of your distribution is the maintainer, which is why I never put my trust in somebody that doesn't know what the fuck they're doing, because anybody can pick up the Arch ISO creator and create a distro. Anybody can write calamares for Gentoo, but like if you don't know what the fuck you're doing, if you can't fix bugs, because I'm going to find bugs. That's kind of what I do. Is I'm not QA or anything, but I will find an issue in your operating system, and or the programs, or sorry, the packages that you upload. I will find problems with it. And what's going to end up happening is you're going to have a lot of issues you can't fix. Sorry about the just desktop background. I'm too lazy to set up gameplay or anything. I should like record some streams, but I don't really have a streaming setup right now. But anyways, the point I'm trying to make though is I found Gentoo much easier to maintain than Arch because the packages are much more stable. The maintainers really know what they're doing, and each package feels like it's not going to break on every update unless I'm using testing, in which case things can happen. But that's one thing that I found about these unstable distributions is I found them very, very difficult to maintain, and that's something for a daily driver that I really don't want. So I always feel a bit vindicated when people switch from these unstable distributions to a more stable one, and they say, "Look, I don't care about the customization anymore. I don't care if I can. Uh, I don't. I don't even care." That was actually another thing too. Was I needed the repositories of a mainstream distribution, which is why OpenSUSE was kind of off the table because of their fucking vendor situation. Like, I don't want to have to go to multiple repositories for basic shit. But Gentoo makes that very easy where you select repository, it's super easy. And whatever you need is probably on the main repository though. I do have a few packages from Guru, but other than that. And Flatpak has made this a lot easier too, where you can switch to a distribution with smaller repositories, and the stuff you actually need is probably available as a Flatpak. So whether or not you need the sandboxing, what you do get, however, is you get packages with all of the use flags enabled. I know that's kind of a Gentoo specific way of putting things, but that's basically what I'm talking about. Is they compile with most of their features enabled. So if you just want to, as long as you don't care about theming, because that always becomes a pain in the ass. So I compile most of my packages, but some things like Discord, like Vencord, I just use the Flatpak. I don't care. Or LibreWolf. I don't want to have to compile LibreWolf. I'd rather, and that was something on Void too, was I just didn't want to do it. So having the repositories isn't as much of an issue as it used to be, where if your distribution didn't have the repository, you didn't have packages. Like you'd have to compile everything from source, and that's no longer the case, which is really cool. But when we're talking about stability though, I always hate it when people say, I don't have any issues. It's like you gotta realize that eventually you're going to have issues, and whether or not you do, that's a completely different story. But I counter your anecdote with another anecdote that I have found problems and I didn't feel like fixing them. you know I would rather my shit just work, which is again kind of an ironic lazy way coming from a Gentoo user that that I use it as a lazy distribution because I don't have to put a lot of effort into things. And that's not something people usually associate with it. So anyways, that was kind of what I was thinking about today, was just everybody says they don't have problems until they do, you know, and you got to ask yourself, if there's problems that I'm likely to have, why am I using this distribution? Do I care about it enough to fix these issues, or is there probably a better option that will not have these issues, you know? That's something I think about a lot, and it's something that the Linux cast brought up recently when he said that he's switching to GNOME, which is something, especially as somebody that really dislikes window managers, because I gotta give my reasoning for it, is with window managers, not only do you have to configure a bunch of shit, but you gotta work around a bunch of shit. Like, a lot of them are super, super buggy, or they have massive incompatibility issues, and it can be completely distro dependent. So I had so many issues with Hyperlink, I had so many issues with DWM that it just wasn't worth using over a desktop environment. And Matt's kind of figured out the same thing. Is now, of course, he switches to GNOME because GNOME, unlike KDE, is very corporate driven. So they've got this thing where every update they make needs to be super fucking stable. It's gonna have bugs. I'm able to crash GNOME desktop like my entire session easily, you know, with reproducible issues that it just happens, you know. But for the most part, if you're using it in an enterprise setting, every update needs to be suitable for enterprise use. And that's something that KDE doesn't have because they aren't the flagship on, I don't believe, any enterprise distribution. OpenSUSE is not the enterprise SUSE. SUSE only supports GNOME. But OpenSUSE, the community version, is flagships KDE as well as GNOME. But I don't know why they say flagship when it just kind of comes with the default stuff. Kind of dumb. But anyways, yeah, like with and what he found was GNOME is really super stable, and if you're coming from super unstable software, yeah, that's gonna look really good. Now you're not gonna get the customization of very buggy software because you're not gonna have the feature set, you know. But it serves a completely different purpose when we're talking about stable versus unstable. And I realize that there is a market for unstable software, you know, but if it doesn't have the people backing it that make it usable, like I don't care to be part of that group, you know. I don't care to uh, test software that the maintainers aren't able to fix themselves. You know, that's just not my problem. I should be able to should be testing packages on a system where people know what they're doing, basically, you know, and they aren't just pushing out bullshit willy nilly. But anyways, that's kind of what I wanted to say. Is just I see a lot of people running very unstable distributions, and the numbers get less and less over time. You know, very few of them remain hell bent on using a very unstable distribution. And obviously, in comments, I'm gonna get so many people that just say I use Arch, by the way. But my my joke I make about that is like, yeah, but you're watching a Gentoo channel, so there's no flex anymore, you know. But that's about it. Thanks.